in here. If you're talking about being uncensored, perhaps I should mention Levi and the Surrey Corps versus Kenny and his squad. I'm sure your senses might have been tingling throughout this whole onslaught. And you'd be right, although even I was surprised at spots that I called while watching. So let's go ahead and get started. At the start of the episode, you see poor Eren stripped and chained in the crystal dungeon. Below, you have Rod Race coming to show Historia his bag of goodies. Compare this to what was cut from the manga. Historia was giving Eren the stink glare as she thought about her older sister Frida. By the way, do notice a cross symbolism in the Frida shot. At this point, Isayama is a master for these type of things. Next up, Rod's fun toy. You'll notice a couple of differences right away. For the syringe box, only one needle now. I'm actually pretty sure that there only being one is going to come into play later. Also, no text on the little potion bottle that holds the Titan juices. In the manga, the text here translated into the strongest Titan. Strangely, it got removed for the anime bottle. In the following scene where Eren is drawing a parallel to what his father did, Anime Grisha adds an extra line about how Eren should be the one to avenge his mother. Lazy bastard. Next up, moving into Mikasa, Levi, and the rest of the Survey Corps versus Kenny and his squad. As for the Survey Corps charging in, the anime still shot had one new addition. Hanji's assistant Moblit is now part of this raid too. I actually don't remember originally where he was during this. As for Team Ackerman piercing the smoke cover for their attack, in the anime you get mostly Levi from Team Ackerman. Compare this to the manga version where you had Mikasa and Levi side by side. I guess gotta put Levi up in front. But to be fair, they did make it up for Mikasa later on. By the way, before anyone started clashing metal or slicing up Kenny's squad like titans, you had manga Hanji making a note about how weird this crystal cave was. Apparently Hanji had theorized that something like this existed. Hanji didn't think this crystal cave structure was man-made. For some reason, she also noted that it was strange that this whole cave was glowing. Oh, and not too important, but they did cut out the flashback of Hanji and Armin coming up with the smoke plan as they were riding to Rod's place. Right here you had poor Sasha getting a few Z's in. I bet she was dreaming of some meat. And no, not the kinky kind. Anyway, now for the Survey Corps onslaught. First off, Horseboy. Unsurprisingly at this point, you were able to see the whole decapitation sliced in the manga version. Jean definitely learned his lesson and showed no mercy at all. Watch out Eren, and better not let this guy become a titan. Next up, Koni. The change in comparison to the manga wasn't too much. Koni's original slice didn't look that deep. It looks more so like a painful haircut. Maybe that guy even survived. On the other hand, for Potato Girl Sasha, gotta give credit when it comes up. Sasha's bullseye on this girl was much more bloody for the anime version. If anything, it was super quick in the manga, and they just sped through it. Further praising the season 3 anime is Hanji's badass kill here. This whole scene looked much more amazing and of course bloody compared to the very rough looking original. Next up, Savage Mikasa Ackerman. Right here in the original manga scene, she only took 2 guys out. I'm really glad that this Ackerman got her normal scene extended and fleshed out for this battle. I mean, Levi already got that chase scene, so it was really time for Mikasa to get some love. Really appreciate this. And talking about Ackermans, next up is Levi going up against Uncle Kenny. I'm sure you heard me mention this in my review for the episode. This was a completely new scene added for the season 3 anime. Originally and unfortunately, Kenny and Levi never fought one another. In fact, manga Levi was keeping a lookout during this whole thing for Kenny during this battle. I can't blame Isayama for wanting to correct this for the anime. Thank you so much. This whole scene was freaking awesome to witness. Do notice, this does mean Kenny got deeply hurt from Levi slashing him. Although the question is, did it really matter? In the scene, it actually looked pretty deep. But then a few minutes later, he's just acting like Levi gave him a light slash when he's going over to Rod. Levi, on the other hand, ended up getting sliced on his cheek. Hey, Mikasa and Levi are matching now. But watch, this will be gone by the next episode. $5 on that. By the way, in case you were wondering, originally manga Kenny was very close to Rod in Historia. He was just there, listening the entire time. Kenny only appeared once he found that he couldn't take the Titan power for himself. Next up, Hanji's little dance with the blonde lady. Once again, credit for the season 3 anime. Not only did they make this look a lot more painful, there's a good difference with the size of that bloodstain down the crystal. Holy crap, Hanji, you shouldn't be able to walk away from that one. As for Kenny and his squad's retreat, this whole cave blockade scene was added as something new for the anime. This of course included Kenny mentioning the ritual. In the manga version, I don't think you see Kenny's squad ever again until Rod's Titan pops up. And oh, that's gonna be so much fun. Next up, Eren Yeager chained up. Damn, this guy is packing much more in the anime. Of course, you also can't show pepperoni in the anime, so Eren's body is missing out on that. In the next shot of Rod and Historia looking up at Eren, Anime Rod cuts out this line regarding Eren's supposed sinful life. When Anime Rod mentions the three walls, he mentions they were created for humanity's protection. However, Manga Rod claimed that this was to protect humanity from the Titans. Small difference, but an important one. During the shot of their almighty Titan, the anime cuts a line from Rod where he mentions that this Titan wished for peace for any humans who remained. As you see a shot of Frida, there's another cut line from Rod about how no one knows how the Titans appeared, except for Frida. In the following Frida flashback, there's quite a few various changes. When Frida Reyes is juicing up, small difference here. In the manga version, you see some sort of ancient writing or markings on the syringe end. For the Reyes smiling uncle here, it's much clearer to see that he has those possessed eyes in the anime. To be honest, he might have been using his almighty Titan powers here to direct Frida's Titan to him to make sure that the job was done right. You know, since you gotta get those spinal juices. As for Frida's Titan, I think it's pretty safe to say that Frida's mindless Titan got a redesign for the Season 3 anime. Frida's mindless Titan looks female and not at all scrawny. Also, do notice the neck area. This seems to resemble Annie's female Titan a little bit. As for the shot of Uncle Reyes being chowed down, the manga version actually gives you this super far shot to show you Frida's Titan, letting you see how skinny this thing was. Of course, you also got to see the leftover Reyes body parts to the side. For the dialogue cut here, Manga Rod told his story about how this person would take on the collection of memories and be entrusted with humanity's fate. Frida was free to reveal the secrets of this world or keep them to herself. Rod added how no one ever chose to reveal these secrets of the world. Hence, it was proof that Frida had inherited the philosophy of the ruler of this land, and also the creator of the walled world. Next up, Kenny's fun betrayal scene. Unfortunately, anime Kenny trolling Historia got cut. Manga Kenny asked Historia whether she thought it was her mission to eat her body and then upset her poor tummy. As for Kenny chatting with Historia, a good chunk of Kenny's dialogue got axed. Manga Kenny reminded Historia how she was born out of misery, that Historia was Rod's accident since he got off with the house servant. Historia's mother thought she could become Rod's actual wife if she had Historia. However, Historia's existence only disgraced everyone, including Papa Rod. Further cut was a flashback to that one night. There's been a lot of questions about why Kenny had to kill the mother, and here it is. Apparently, Kenny claimed that it was the assembly that ordered this cleansing of the royal family. This meant getting rid of the servant and Historia. Rod only chose to save Historia since she might be useful later. Of course, since Rod's children were killed off by Grisha. Next up, Kenny's handy dagger work. A couple of good chunks got left on the table. Manga Kenny revealed how at one point, he tried to hide the fact that Frida and the founding Titan had been stolen. Supposedly, this was due to Rod being frightened about not being important anymore. It was actually only until Eren had used his Titan powers that Rod was forced to reveal them not having the Titan power. There is more, but it all boils down to Kenny screaming about how Rod only cared about himself, and definitely not about Historia or humanity. Next up, Rod trying to be this badass by grabbing Kenny's dagger with his bare hand. I'm sure you thought of this too. Where the hell was the blood? Manga Rod actually got his hand sliced from pulling this little stunt. I do have a feeling this will be slightly different for the Blu-ray release, since it seems so odd to leave it as is. Following this was Rod pressuring Historia to go into Titan mode. Anime Rod skipped the detail about how this shot was specifically picked out by him in order to make Historia the strongest Titan suited for battle. One change I really wish they had kept in was them cutting right into the Titan flash transformation. Originally, you were left to think that Historia actually pulled the trigger to become a Titan, so a cliffhanger ending. Manga readers wouldn't find out they got tricked until a month later. Next up, during Historia's internal conflict, you saw her thinking back to Ymir. However, this is where something significant got cut out. Mixed into her conflict was her recalling Ymir and Frida. For Frida's scene, she was actually thinking back to when she was younger. Right here, Frida brought up about how Historia was crossing the fence again. Frida then freaked the hell out, just screaming at young Historia. Frida told her to never cross the fence. Perhaps Isayama wanted to erase this aspect of Frida, which is kind of ironic. Meanwhile, as Kenny is Spider-Manning on the side wall, Manga Kenny goes on about how Historia has no guts. At this point, Kenny wanted Historia to become the ruler of this world. But back to Historia. More stuff regarding her sister Frida was cut out. Historia recalled how Frida used to sometimes act like a completely different person, almost as if she was possessed. During this, Frida claimed that they were all sinners. Afterwards, Frida would be extremely depressed. Historia wonder whether this was due to Frida inheriting the first king's ideology. Overall, this Frida change is pretty interesting. Is this Isayama retconning this aspect of their Titan? Perhaps. Next up, as Ron is describing how his brother inherited the Titan powers from his father, Manga Ron said his brother volunteered for the task. In exchange, Uri asked Rod to pray for him. Following this, Rod gave his little god speech. Manga Rod also mentioned how there was a meaning to every catastrophe. Whether humanity was destroyed or survived was up to God to decide. Right here, also notice how he stabbed the needle into Historia's arm during this. Next up, the scene of Eren bitching out. Before Historia gave him a good smacking, Manga Eren also included how Historia was part of this chosen bloodline, and about how he wasn't special at all. So hopefully you enjoyed this breakdown on the changes. Definitely like and subscribe if you want to see these weekly. Ra's almighty massive Titan is coming. By the way, really quickly, let me tell you about my huge Patreon update. Please go ahead and check it out. Find out how much work it takes into getting over 5 videos out every week. If you do enjoy the over 20 videos I put out every month, please do consider becoming a supporter. The lowest tier is just $1, which includes access to the Discord server. So come join us. But anyway, let me hear from you now. Question of the day. Who didn't want to see Levi battling Kenny? Did you also like the new Savage scene added for Mikasa? And why do you think the Frida stuff got erased? Anyway, definitely give this a colossal thumbs up and subscribe. If you're new to the channel, I put out 5+ anime videos here every week. That includes a lot of Attack on Titan content. Hopefully you see my breakdown on this week's episode. Fingers crossed that doesn't get taken down. Be sure to check out the other 6 anime versus manga videos, hit the bell notifications, and I'll see you guys later.